There is a hidden power in a story told with a soft voice and a steady, unwavering hand. Experience our smooth, cinematic narratives that whisper the truths the world has been trying to forget for centuries. Click subscribe now and listen to the soul of storytelling.
My brother-in-law walked me down the aisle at my own graduation ceremony. My father was somewhere over the Gulf of Mexico at the time, and my mother was probably on her second glass of Chardonnay at 30,000 feet. Neither of them called to say congratulations until 2 days later. And even then, my mother led with, "I hope you understand why we couldn't be there." I understood perfectly. I had understood for most of my life. I want to start at the beginning though, because the ending only makes sense if you know where it all started. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, in a house with green shutters and a cracked driveway that my father always promised to fix but never did. I have one sibling, my brother, who is 3 years younger than me. His name is Derek, and from the time he was old enough to smile at my parents across the dinner table, he was the one they chose. Not once, not occasionally. Every single time, without exception, without apology, Derek was their first choice. I don't say that with bitterness the way I used to. I say it now the way you describe the weather, plainly, because it's just a fact. When I was 12 and Derek was 9, I asked my mother if I could take piano lessons. She said money was tight. 6 months later, Derek got a brand new electric guitar, a practice amp, and weekly lessons from a guy who drove 45 minutes from the other side of town. I taught myself piano from YouTube videos on the family computer after everyone went to sleep. When I applied to colleges, my parents sat me down at the kitchen table and explained very carefully that they had a limited amount of money set aside for education. They were saving it, they said, because Derek was only 2 years behind me, and they wanted to be fair. They gave me $2,000 toward my first semester and told me the rest was on me. I took out loans, applied for every scholarship I could find, and worked 25 hours a week at a campus coffee shop to cover the gap. When Derek applied to the same state school 2 years later, my parents paid his full tuition. All 4 years, plus a monthly stipend for living expenses so he wouldn't have to work and could focus on his studies. I remember standing in the kitchen when my mother told me this, watching her pour herself coffee like she'd just mentioned something as unremarkable as the grocery list. She didn't look at me once. I graduated with a degree in computer science, $68,000 in student loans, and a job offer from a tech company in Austin, Texas, that paid more than my parents had ever made combined. I was 22 years old and I had done every single bit of it myself. My parents were proud of me, in the abstract way people are proud of things that don't require anything from them. My mother put a photo on Facebook. My father told his coworkers his daughter worked in tech. But neither of them had ever driven to campus to watch me receive anything. I had walked across that stage alone. I moved to Austin in August. I made friends, built a life, adopted a cat named Douglas, and slowly, very slowly, started to feel like a person who deserved good things. 3 years after I moved, I met a man named James at a work event. He was a structural engineer who made terrible puns and remembered every small thing I ever mentioned in passing. He once drove 40 minutes to bring me soup when I texted him that I was sick, and we hadn't even been on a second date yet. I knew within 6 months that I was going to marry him. During all of this, I was still sending my parents money. I know. I hear you. I could already feel you shaking your head at me while I was doing it. It started the year after I graduated. My father called and mentioned, in the particular tone he used when he wanted something, low and slightly strained, like he was confessing something painful, that the property taxes had gone up and they were a little stretched that month. He didn't ask. He never asked directly. He just described the situation until I offered. I sent $300 and told myself it was a one-time thing. It was not a one-time thing. Within a year it had become a regular arrangement, somewhere between $300 and $400 a month, never formally discussed, never acknowledged, as anything other than my parents borrowing from me in a way that somehow never got repaid. I told myself I was helping family. I told myself it was the right thing to do. The honest answer, the one I could only see clearly years later, is that I was still trying to earn something they had never actually been willing to give me. James knew about the payments. He never told me to stop, but sometimes when I'd transfer the money he'd get, very quiet in a way that said everything he was too kind to say out loud. His parents, his mother Carol, and his father Ed, treated me like a daughter from the first month they knew me. Ed once fixed a shelf in my apartment without being asked. Carol texted me recipes. It was so unfamiliar I didn't know what to do with it for almost a year. James proposed on a Tuesday evening in our apartment, down on one knee with his grandmother's ring, which she had told Carol years ago should go to whoever James chose. Carol had saved it for him for 15 years. When I said yes, Carol cried on the phone for so long that James had to take over and explain that yes, I had actually said yes, and no, I wasn't just being polite. My parents, when I called them that night, said they were happy for me. My mother asked if we had set a date yet. My father asked if James had a good job. It was a 3-minute phone call. We chose a date 14 months out. A Saturday in September, in the Texas Hill Country, at a vineyard. James and I had visited on our first road trip together. 90 guests. My dress had a low back and a long train, and when I put it on for the first time at the bridal shop, I called Carol on FaceTime and she screamed so loud the attendant came running. I invited my parents 8 months in advance. I sent a formal invitation, then called, then confirmed again 3 months before the date. My mother said they were looking forward to it. My father said he'd put it on the calendar. I made them a hotel reservation at a place 15 minutes from the venue, sent them the address, and told them I would cover the room. I did not send a similar invitation to Derek, because Derek and I had not spoken in 2 years. A story that is too long for this, but which ends with him telling me at a Christmas dinner that I was difficult to love, and me deciding that I was done trying to make him understand why that wasn't acceptable. 7 weeks before the wedding, my mother called me on a Wednesday night. I was making dinner. She told me, in a voice that was somehow both apologetic and already defending itself, that she and my father had just booked flights to Portland. I turned off the stove. She explained that Derek and his girlfriend had just closed on a house that my parents had quietly contributed to, I would find out later, $40,000 toward the down payment. And they were having a housewarming party the weekend before my wedding. My mother said she and my father were going to fly out Thursday, spend 4 days, and fly home Sunday. The wedding was the following Saturday. I asked her if they were coming back in time. She paused. The kind of pause that is itself an answer. She said flying back and then turning around to drive to the venue, which was 2 hours from Columbus, would be too much. She said they were getting older and travel was hard. She said she hoped I would understand. I want to be very precise about what happened inside me in that moment, because I think it matters. I did not explode. I did not cry. Something went very quiet and very cold, like a window closing in winter. I said I heard her. I said I let her know if the hotel reservation needed to be changed. I said goodbye and I hung up. Then I sat down on my kitchen floor, and Douglas came and sat next to me, and I cried for about 45 minutes in a way I hadn't cried since I was a teenager. James came home to find me on the floor. He sat down next to me without asking any questions first. Just put his arm around me and let me tell it. When I finished, he didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, "We're going to have a beautiful wedding. Every person who loves you will be there." He was right. And they were. My parents left 2 seats empty in the front row. Ed walked me down the aisle. Carol held my bouquet when James and I said our vows. My friends were there. James's family was there. People who had driven hours to be there were there. The ceremony was outside under a September sky, and the light turned gold right at the moment we were pronounced married. And James cried a little, which he will deny, and it was the best day of my life. My parents did not call that day. My mother sent a text at 11:30 at night that said, "Congratulations, honey. We are so sorry we couldn't make it, sending love." I looked at it once and put my phone face down on the nightstand. For 3 weeks after the wedding, I heard nothing from them. No call, no card in the mail, nothing. Then, on a Thursday morning in October, I got an email from a law firm in Columbus I had never heard of. The subject line said, "Estate of Robert Allen Greer. Beneficiary notification." I almost marked it as spam. My grandfather, my mother's father, who had died when I was 24, had been a quiet, methodical man who worked for 40 years as a machinist and lived in the same house in Worthington from the time he was 30 until the time he died. He didn't talk about money. He drove a 15-year-old pickup truck. He kept a vegetable garden and he gave me $20 every birthday in a card that always said the same thing. Be smart. Be kind. Don't let anyone make you small. I adored him. He was the only person in my family who came to every single thing. Every school play, every graduation, every cross-country meet in the rain. When I moved to Austin, he hugged me for a very long time and didn't say much. And when I got in the car, I looked back and he was still standing in the driveway. I had no idea what he had left behind. My mother had handled everything after he died, and she had mentioned an estate, but told me there wasn't much. Just the house, which was sold, and some personal effects. The email was from an attorney named Patricia Osei. She asked me to call her at my earliest convenience regarding a trust established by Robert Allen Greer in 2009. I called her that afternoon from my car, parked outside my office building, because I knew I would need to be somewhere private. Patricia Osei was direct and warm at the same time. She explained that my grandfather had established a revocable living trust in 2009 and had updated it twice since then. Most recently in 2017, the year before he died, the trust had been structured to mature, meaning become accessible to its beneficiary, 7 years after his death, which was this year. The delay, she explained, was intentional. My grandfather had instructed it specifically. He wanted to make sure any beneficiary was settled, established, old enough to use it well. She told me I was the sole beneficiary. I asked her to repeat that. She did. The trust held the proceeds from the sale of his house, several decades of carefully maintained savings accounts, and a small portfolio of investments that had been managed quietly and well. After fees, taxes, and all administrative costs, the total available to me was $241,000. I sat in my car for a very long time after that call. I thought about the way my mother had told me there wasn't much left after he died. I thought about how she had handled everything. I thought about whether she had known. And I thought about what it meant that Patricia Osei had sent the notification letter to my personal email. Which meant my grandfather had made sure it reached me directly. He had known exactly what he was doing. He had known his daughter. He had made sure she could not intercept this. I thought about the $20 birthday cards in the vegetable garden in the driveway. I thought about, don't let anyone make you small. I didn't tell James that night. I needed 24 hours to sit with it alone. I made dinner, we watched something on TV, I went to bed and stared at the ceiling. The next morning I called Patricia Osei back and asked what I needed to do. The process took about 3 weeks. There was paperwork, there was verification, there was a phone call with the investment manager. I retained Patricia as my attorney throughout, and I am so glad I did, because she caught 2 things in the documentation I would have completely missed. She is extraordinarily good at her job. I did not tell my parents. I want to address that directly because I know what some of you are thinking. My grandfather had chosen this. He had constructed it carefully, deliberately, with a 7-year wait and a direct notification pathway that bypassed my mother entirely. He had not left anything to my mother or my father or Derek. He had left it to me. I don't know all of the reasons, but I know enough of them. I was not going to call my parents and announce this. I was going to use it the way he had intended. Wisely and well. James and I sat down with a spreadsheet the weekend after the funds transferred. We went line by line. The first thing we did was pay off my student loans. $68,000, gone, in a single transaction. I have no way to fully describe what that felt like. I had been carrying that weight since I was 22 years old. I had made payments on it for 8 years. Watching that balance go to zero was like setting down something so heavy I had forgotten how heavy it was. The second thing was James's loans. Smaller than mine, but real. We paid those off too. The third thing was a down payment on a house. We had been saving, but the Austin market is brutal and we had resigned ourselves to another 2 or 3 years of waiting. With what remained, we put 30% down on a house in a neighborhood we loved. A 1960s ranch style with a big backyard and original hardwood floors. And a kitchen that needed updating, which we were planning to do ourselves over time. With what was left after that, I established a scholarship. I set it up through the community college in Worthington, Ohio, my grandfather's town. It's for first-generation college students studying technical fields, renewable every year for 4 years if the student maintains good standing. The first recipient was notified last spring. She's studying electrical engineering. I haven't met her, but I know she exists. And I think about my grandfather's vegetable garden every time I do. When my parents found out, and they did find out, eventually, the way things always do in families, my mother called me crying. She said she hadn't known about the trust. I don't know whether to believe that. She said she felt blindsided. She said she wished I had told her. I let her finish. Then I asked her, quietly, whether she remembered the morning she called me to tell me she wouldn't be at my wedding. I asked if she remembered the sound of my voice when she said it. She didn't say anything. I told her I loved her, because I do, in the complicated and grief-touched way you love people who have failed you. I told her I wasn't angry anymore. I told her I was finished trying to earn something she wasn't able to give me, and that I had decided to give myself the things I deserved, instead. I told her I had used my grandfather's gift the way he would have wanted, to build something real. She cried again. She said she was sorry. I don't know what she meant by it exactly, and I didn't ask. I hung up and went into the backyard. The tree in the corner had dropped leaves all over the grass, and I needed to rake. And it was a cool afternoon, and Douglas was sitting in the window watching me. James was inside making dinner and I could hear him singing badly to something on the kitchen speaker. I raked the leaves into a pile, and I stood there for a minute in the quiet. The last thing I want to say is this. I spent the better part of my 20s handing things to people who had never asked whether the weight was too much for me to carry. $300 here, $400 there. Every holiday, every phone call, every attempt to be loved back. And under all of that, there was a quiet man in a pickup truck in Ohio who had been watching, who had seen exactly who I was, and exactly what was happening, and who had spent 40 years building something and then waited patiently to hand it to me when I was ready. He was right about the 7 years. I was ready. I knew what to do with it. On the day I paid off my loans, I took out one of the birthday cards I had saved. I kept all of them in a shoebox in my closet. $20 bills long since spent and replaced with better things. His handwriting was small and even and careful. Be smart. Be kind. Don't let anyone make you small. I had a frame made for it. It's on the wall in the hallway of our house, between the kitchen and the front door. I walk past it every morning. I think that's probably exactly what he would have wanted.